Hello and welcome to the third trimester of the Great Books Course 2022. I hope that you're all well and had a wonderful summer. Now, for this occasion, I have a great pleasure to introduce you to Brenda Crowther. I'm sure that most of you know her already because she has been acting as an external faculty at Ubiquity University. She has already given us wonderful courses such as the I Ching course, the course on alchemy, and also Jung's Red Book and various other presentations. In case you don't know her, she's a graduate of Research and Training Center in Depth Psychology, according to the Carl Gustav Jung and Marie-Louise von Franz in Zurich, Switzerland, and also the Guild of Analytical Psychologists in London. She's a senior analyst and a member of Association of Jungian Analysts in London. Additionally, she's also a training analyst with the Jung Institute in Switzerland. She's a fellow of Guild of Pastoral Psychology, awarded for her contribution to Jungian psychology. She gives private consultations and workshops on the I Ching, the ancient Chinese oracle book, which has studied and used for over 40 years. She lives in Burgundy, France, and she also plays the cello and paints and currently writes a book. Now, for this session and for the next one, the book, which you already know, will be on Carl Gustav Jung, The Psychology of Kundalini Yoga. To him, Kundalini Yoga presented him with an account of developmental phases of higher consciousness. His lectures offer a modern psychological interpretation of the chakras and their systems. To Jung, Kundalini Yoga and the symbolism of Tantric Yoga, Lamaism, and Taoist yoga in China provided him with an invaluable comparative material for the interpretation of the collective unconscious. Kundalini, as you know so well, is represented in a form of a serpent coiled around the spine that lies sleeping in a Muladhara, the lowest chakra. Feuerstein defined the Kundalini as the microcosmic manifestation of the primordial energy or Shakti. It is the universal power as it is connected with the finite body-mind. The object is to awaken Kundalini through ritual practices and to enable her ascent up to the Shushumani Nadi through the chakra system. When it reaches the topmost chakra, the blissful union of Shiva and Shakti occurs. This leads to a far-reaching transformation of the personality. Now, before I pass the word on to dear Brenda, I'd like to say that in case you don't have the book, please let me know. I can email it to you in PDF version. And as usual, Brenda will give us an hour presentation followed by questions and answers. So over to you, dear Brenda.
Thank you very much, Georgie. And welcome to this presentation on the psychology of Kundalini Yoga by G Jung. I thought I'd like to explain to you why I picked this book. Several years ago, I had a cluster of therapy clients going through the experiences of Kundalini. These included dreams, visions, and very unusual so-called concrete or physical experiences. I say that because some experiences were visible to other people, spilling out from the inwardly psychic into perceived affect or sensation. All were composed of the elements of fire, air, earth, and water, the elements giving liveliness and a structure to the theme of Kundalini. It's a subject that's filled many books, touched many people's hearts, and of the people that I really accompanied through the experience, changed their whole lives, changed the whole orientation of their lives. So during this period, when for some reason I attracted so many people with Kundalini, I found this book very helpful. And here's the cover: G Jung, The Psychology of Kundalini Yoga. So this presentation is in two parts. The first session explains Kundalini and shares some of the experience of my therapy clients, the second session shares more of these experiences. But first we need to be, shall we say, grounded into what Kundalini is and how it affects people. So the first thing I really must say is a huge thank you to my therapy clients for being willing and generous to disclose, to share their Kundalini experiences, though of course anonymously. So we will come to that, but first of all, let's begin at the beginning. The Kundalini is symbolized by a sleeping snake, which is coiled up at the base of the spine. The position of her head, for she's always a she, blocks the Kundalini energy from rising through the vertebral column. Once activated, the snake uncoils and begins her climb through the chakras. As I said, it's a cosmic feminine energy, and I express more of this material as we go through this session. But I wanted to give you that image to follow. I refer to it quite a lot, and to my mind it's very easy to imagine a snake being coiled and then rising slowly or often quickly up the spine. So the research that I made on this book was to enable people going through the experience. So it's not strictly academic. So the study of it helped me to better understand and support individuals. There was a huge variety of experiences, but always a warning of the Kundalini event. So for this reason, it's important to look at the dreams, which I speak about soon, and how they're seen in the context of the Kundalini experience and not just as generalized psychology. The dreams have very little, if any, personal associations and are a good example of a near complete expression and experience of the cosmic universal world or world soul. So it's a very objective experience, though it is also naturally personally experienced. Despite the warning of Kundalini arising, it is rarely understood on the conscious level. But at least the psyche is prepared. The experience is generally unexpected, spontaneous, bursting into rational life like a capriciously thrown firework. Not one person I saw had been to a Kundalini workshop, practiced Kundalini yoga, or even thought of raising this energy, and so could not give it a name when it happened. Many workshops which are set up these days have a tendency to cultivate the strange and thrilling experience, that is, to steal something from the mysterious Orient without understanding its meaning and potency in terms of a spiritual experience. In the West, as we would expect, because of our conditioning towards the rational, there is a tendency to have more trust in the power of the overarching will. So often the urge to inquire and dominate by intellectual study. Of the people I saw, none of them got that far because they were all thrown into a state of bewilderment, where rationalizing or intellectual study was simply impossible and dissolved. So, in general, the Kundalini experience lasted for about 2 years, though I am aware that moments of this occur in meditation. But I'm speaking today about the total experience that invades every waking and sleeping moment of every day and every night. The initial experience comes in the form of a physical onslaught, and a frightening one at that. I received a phone call from one individual asking for help with something, and his voice was trembling. I thought, I hope he isn't going into a psychosis. I said that he had to come along. I couldn't speak about something on the telephone. He came 2 days later. I needn't have feared. There on my doorstep was a young man of about 32, slight and fair, held together well, in a state of awesome fear. Not neurotic fear, awesome fear, of absolute incomprehension. The Kundalini snake had begun to uncoil, and what could he do? So I felt my work with the book Psychology of Kundalini Yoga was to help with the understanding and acceptance of this experience. There could be no amplification on the symbolic level, only to be attentive to the spiritual meaning. So it was very important not to interfere, not to intervene in the experience. Better, I felt, to try to root the experience into the inexplicable, an acceptance of the mysterious. I noticed too that the Kundalini reduced the existing values of the human being to nothing. And then I was privileged to watch new values being born. I didn't ask about what was happening to the person. I tried not to be curious until the person wanted to say something. It was in this way that I recorded the material, but afterwards, of course. Jung might call Kundalini a ritual initiation, for that is what it is. It's a ritual into a life which is deeply symbolic. There are many parallels to Jungian psychology, and Jung was no doubt inspired to study Kundalini, hence the seminars that he gave on the subject, besides the fact that he had patience with these experiences. I knew of one person who checked into a psychiatric clinic with Kundalini and was treated with drugs to subdue it. What a solution for a religious, a spiritual experience. Isn't that a most inappropriate way to use rationalism when it has other good uses? With that attitude, the Kundalini risks resting in the psyche as an autonomous power, all tied up like one of the titans and just stuck in the underworld. And as you know, the old-fashioned word for an autonomous power in a human being is either a possession or an entity. So Jung very early modernized the vocabulary to lessen the fear of modern man, for his rationalism had taken him beyond appreciating having something like an entity in his psyche, which seemed to him or her to come from the Middle Ages. Jung used the word, which is now in popular use, he used the word complex. So the snake, uncoiling at the base of the spine, is such a psychic entity, such a complex. There's a very good supporting book for Jung's Kundalini Yoga by Lillian Silburn called Kundalini, Energy of the Depths. It expresses this quality of the Kundalini very well. When speaking of the chakras, she describes them as whirling wheels around a central axis. And here this gives us a simple view of the chakras. You see they're all like little wheels. There are 7 of them. Sobun describes how the whirling wheels of the chakras in ordinary persons do not vibrate or revolve. The wheels can't turn because there are knots or tangles in the chakras. So here, she says, matter and spirit are entangled, and thus they strengthen the sense of ego. So some of these knots are not easily loosened, and together they constitute what we call the unconscious complexes. And we all know how dreadfully difficult it is to penetrate the complexes, how hard it is to even undo something like an inferiority complex or a mother complex. We can spend years in therapy. So it takes an awful lot of work to examine our complexes. So these knots that form the chakras, through their attachment to the past, to our history, are weighty and rigid and offer a strong opposition to the passage of the spiritual force. So they block the Kundalini from rising up through the spine. You see here perhaps a more complex picture of the chakras, but this is from Jung's book. Now, Kundalini, before we begin, is totally feminine. When the Kundalini comes, it's the goddess coming to confront you. In general, as we said earlier, she visits for about 2 years, travelling all through the hidden chambers and complexes of the psyche, penetrating the chakras, releasing this tangled mass, moving up and down the whole length of the body. And you see that she winds around the central column. So in the West, we don't have a word for Kundalini, but although we use the Indian word, we do have the experience of it. So in this sculpture of St. Teresa, you see that she's being approached by Cupid with an arrow in his hand, and he's actually piercing her heart. The arrow is aimed at her heart. This shows St. Teresa in a mystical trance. So the arrows of Cupid or Eros are aimed at her heart. So it is a combination of ecstasy and torment, a description that individuals going through Kundalini describe. And here, of course, is her face. It's total ecstasy and torment together. So Kundalini is a psychological, a psychic, and a spiritual experience. All those 3 things. So these 3 threads will emerge and wind together as we move through the presentation. So this first one is going to explain how the chakras work, how the Kundalini rises, what sets it off, and also some experiences. The second section will go into the experiences more and describe how Jung sees them. So let's start with the psychological. Jung calls the Kundalini seminars the psychology of Kundalini yoga. So it's very important to note this and begin here. Jung stops at the 5th chakra, which is the last of the chakras we call psychological. And this is the throat chakra. This is the last localization of the unconscious complex. So Jung is really showing great respect for this discipline by keeping within the boundaries of his own discipline and not going into something that he doesn't have a deep knowledge of. So he places a limit, and that would be the limit of the psychological. So the Visuddha, which is the throat chakra, is the bridging point between the psychological and the psychic. So let's name the chakras that a snake climbs through. At the bottom, the root chakra is Muladhara. This element is the earth. Its localization is actually in the tailbone at the end of the spine, or the perineum. But that's where its affect is. The second chakra, just below the navel, is the Svadhisthana, and this is the water element. It's located or the Manipura. This is the fire element, the fire chakra. And its localization is in the pancreas. Then we come to Anahata. Now this is the heart chakra. And this is the element of air. And this is found or localized or finds its effect in the thymus. Now, this is quite a thought because the thymus protects us against infection. And we have, of course, just had a worldwide infection. The Visuddha, which I've commented on, the element of Visuddha chakra is the ether element. And it finds its affect in the thyroid. So this is the list of the chakras. So we could say that the fifth chakra, Visuddha, is the last location for the psychological complexes that we spoke about a few minutes ago. We named the ether joins the four together. Now, quinta is Latin for fifth, and the Visuddha is the fifth chakra. So even physically one could say that the neck is a kind of opening into the blossoming or the blooming of the head, and leads us into the chakras with no psychological associations. That is the ajna, between the eyebrows, and the sarasrara, which is the crown chakra. So when you come to the sixth and the seventh chakras, you leave the realm of personal and objective psychological work behind. Now, to the psychological and the psychic experiences, we can add the spiritual dimension. When the Kundalini takes us out of the psychological, psychic, sensory dimension, we go into a much, much deeper realm. This is beyond self-knowing. So when we work on the first 5 chakras, we're working psychologically. For example, in therapy, getting to understand our complexes, trying to find a deeper relationship with our inner self, understanding the inner figures that might come in dreams, or what pops up when you paint something. So as soon as we cross to the throat chakra, we go beyond the task of knowing ourselves. There's a sudden reversal. Something begins to know us. And it's at that point that our will to understand ceases and something else takes over. There is a dream by Jung, his yogi dream, which perfectly illustrates this, and I will read you the dream. I'm walking along a little road through the hilly landscape. The sun was shining, and I had a wide view in all directions. Then I came to a small wayside chapel. The door was ajar, and I went in. To my surprise, there was no image of the Virgin on the altar, and no crucifix either, but only a wonderful flower arrangement. But then I saw that on the floor in front of the altar sat a yogi, in lotus position, in deep meditation. When I looked at him more closely, I realized he had my face. I started in profound fright and awoke with the thought, aha, so he is the one who is meditating me. He has a dream and I am it. I knew then that when he awakened, I would no longer be. So you see things reverse. So Jung is describing here what happens in the 6th and 7th chakras. He's crossed over the 5th one, Visuddha, and he says that the aim of the dream is to effect the reversal of the relationship between ego consciousness, that's the part of us that does things, and the unconscious as the generator of the empirical personality. So this reversal suggests that in the opinion of the other side, that is, the beyond, our unconscious existence is the real one, and our conscious world, the bit that we touch, is a kind of illusion, an apparent reality constructed for a specific purpose, like a dream which seems a reality as long as we are in it. It is clear that this state of affairs resembles closely the Oriental conception of Maya. Maya is the goddess of illusion. So think now of the knots that Lillian Silbum described, when the wheels of the whirling chakras are not vibrating and can't spin. She describes the knots as a tangle of spirit and matter, tough psychological complexes which prevent the chakras turning and block the rise of the Kundalini. If we reflect on Jung's hypothesis about reality in the above dream, the dream we've just heard, we can say that the world of matter, me sitting here, is an illusion, and the unconscious, where dreams come from, is the reality. So we have to take into account with Kundalini this aspect of Maya, which is very much Indian philosophy. So, to separate the illusion from reality so that the complex can spin, and we are not weaving together anymore these knots, we have to separate. Alchemy calls this a separatio or a separation, and it's the equivalent of plumbing all our psychological complexes and separating what is an illusion from what is a reality. And this comes by way of psychological experience, perhaps in therapy, and our experiences and realizations coming from that. So in psychology and alchemy, Jung describes this separation. He says, the spirit must first be separated from the body, and after purification of the latter, that's the body, the matter, they come back together again. So the Kundalini energy does that within the chakras. It separates the matter from the spirit. It takes all the tangled, rigid mass of all those unconscious complexes and penetrates through the knots until the chakras spin free. So this is the psychological approach of Jung to the chakras. So in terms of this process, and related to Jung's dream, it is really the separation of illusion, which is matter, and spirit. So you can imagine that when the Kundalini experience begins, it's an extremely painful process, quite physical. From this, we can perhaps intuit that what we call reality, that is, the common sense material world, is a necessary illusion. And that illusion is given to us to work on the development of consciousness. Thus we work towards the reality of the unconscious, which is the real generator of our personality that we experience every day. Our concrete world is thus, in accordance with Kundalini, an illusion. We just have to think of how we approach things in everyday terms. As Jung says, our basis in the West is ego consciousness. So if we are doing active imagination or are having dreams, and we discover circular forms in our dreams, such forms symbolize wholeness for us. And it's a perennial image that the circle is always the wholeness. So it is the ego that looks out with its very sharp and bright light to search into an obscure, puzzling and shadow-laden unconscious realm. And extracting these symbols then generates meaning. Yet they are images from the unconscious, from reality. So the meaning is reality. In Jung's dream of the yogi, the ego consciousness has a reversed location. The yogi is dreaming Jung. The yogi in his dream is the conscious one, the reality, who meditates Jung into a material image. In the dream, this is revealed to Jung. I offer you a small experience of the illusion of the concrete world that we call real. I also call it real. Even if I am conscious that it is not, I fall into my own cultural conditioning. But it is useful too, for many share that illusion with me, and we can communicate with each other and talk about the illusion. It was many years ago, this experience, at least 30. I was walking to the university where I worked at that time, and it was early in the morning. It was cool, and I walked along a cobbled street. I was in an open state of mind, looking upwards and enjoying the freshness of the day. Without any warning, the concrete world disappeared. For a second, the world did not exist. With the same suddenness, it appeared again. My heart missed a beat. I reflected a long time on the experience and gradually came to realize that it was matter, the stuff I touched, that was an illusion, and the spirit of the unconscious, the vital spirit of the unconscious, was the real, was the reality. The same experience comes in Kundalini. We receive an onslaught of sensations, visions, dreams, and this is a super reality from that other side, the unconscious. This makes some people run for the perceived safer and more rational world of the psychiatrist. Yet I must admit that the majority have an instinct that there is something untamed, savage, truthful and natural in this experience. Here one finds the real spirit of the inner adventure, the journey through the psyche. As Mary Oliver, the American poet, says, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" But to follow the adventure that the psyche has given us. Kundalini is such an adventure. It's not haphazard. He says, "Woe betide those who live by examples. Life is not with them. If you live according to an example, you thus live the life of that example. But who should live your own life, if not yourselves? So live yourself. You seek the path. I warn you, away from my own. It can also be the wrong way for you. May each go his own way." That's a short quotation from the Red Book. So these mere appearances, the books, the opinions, are the illusion. For Jung asks the question, what good is all that? That is, he understands that illusion and eventually will work with a profound one. His illusion was alchemy. So when each individual takes his or her own path, Kundalini comes to each in her way. But now, let's return to the journey of the chakras and the journey of the lively serpent, like Jung's Muladhara chakra, or root chakra, which you see here. And as I said before, it's located in the tailbone, or root chakra, at the bottom of the spine and in the perineum. Now, I say it's located there. That's not strictly speaking where it is. That's just where you feel it. It's an affect. So, of course, the chakra is in what we call the subtle body. And this must not be rationalized onto the physical plane, even though it is a physical location. So, when the yogi opens his eyes in Jung's dream, it is the death of the physical body. That is, it's the death of the illusion, and it is the awakening of the subtle body. So, yogi with eyes closed, living in illusion or matter. Yogi with eyes opened, the subtle body springs to life. As Jung says, when the yogi opens his eyes, he will die. That is, he will have a psychological death and will be renewed on a higher level. So when the separatio occurs, you see that if you look at it, you'll see that they join together, the two lines like that. So this is when the matter and spirit are joining together. And then suddenly there's a separatio, and they're joined together at the top of the next chakra. And then they separate again and join together at the top of the next. And so they go on, right until the top. What's happening? Well, each time you separate matter from spirit, it comes together on a higher and more conscious level. And then it separates again, and up it goes again onto a more conscious level. So consciousness is being created by the Kundalini when it's released. So let's look at a Western example of what could happen here. Think of the transubstantiation of the Mass, when, in the Roman Catholic ritual, the natural ordinary wheat bread in the communion is raised to the state of the subtle body, because the priest at that point is able to separate the matter from the spirit. So when the participant in the Mass eats the bread, he's partaking of the subtle body, and this then will have a transformative effect. So it's important to see also that this can only happen if the participant is responsive, and perhaps the priest doing his work. So when the tangles of the chakras are loosened, when matter is separated from spirit, then illusion is separated from reality, and up goes the spiritual energy, Kundalini, through the spinal column. And as they go up, they spin all the chakras. So it's important to note that what wakes up in Kundalini is the subtle body. And then the activity of the subtle body is referred to the physical body, which feels it through the senses. So what is the subtle body? In Jung's Red Book, imagination is the star that leads to reality. And he describes it as a super-celestial body. He says, "To this one star man shall pray. Prayer increases the light of the star. It throws a bridge across death." What can throw a bridge across death, if not a separation that we've just been talking about? So once, when the final separation comes, the illusion falls away, and the real thing resurrects and travels on towards death. Recently, I went to Chartres Cathedral, and I feel that some of you may have been there. I found a wonderful example of the subtle body before it comes into material manifestation, before it becomes an illusion. Here it is. This is from the north portal of the cathedral, and I thought it was rather marvellous. The figure at the front is God, and he's making the birds out of clay, though that doesn't matter for this example. But behind him, the other figure, is Adam. And this is a thought of God before Adam is made. That is, before Adam is made into matter and becomes an illusion. So we pass through reality and illusion all the time. So we can count this as part of the creation myth, when God created the world in 7 days. So the creation myth, in fact, all creation myths, become a vast, beautiful and profound illusion, as all myths are. It's a myth that enables the work on consciousness. Similarly, when we have the joy of finding our personal myth, this is our enabling illusion that allows us, through enthusiasm, relationship, absorption, to develop our consciousness through an intensely personal relationship to that myth. So we can see how the illusion helps us to develop consciousness. As Shakespeare says, we are such stuff as dreams are made on. We're made on dreams like Jung's yogi. Now we have some relations to themes that come up with Kundalini. Jung's dream of the yogi, his realization and understanding of illusion and reality, expressed in matter and spirit in alchemy, where body is parallel to illusion and spirit is the reality. So we saw the difference between the whirling chakras and the subtle body. And then we saw the universal conception of illusion through the myth and Adam as God's thought, before he manifests as matter. We've also looked a little at the separatio, the separation, the role it plays in separating matter from spirit, coming together, separating again. I hope that's given you an overview of the background of the Kundalini experience. So now we really begin our ascent through the divine journey, through the chakras. So we might ask, how and where does it all begin? The best expression is always a living one. I'm going to give you a description of the awakening of the Muladhara chakra from the book by Irina Tweedy, aptly named Daughter of Fire. This will begin our journey. After that, we will look at a premonition dream from a more ordinary individual. Irina Tweedy is in a group of people around her guru, and suddenly he turns to her and says, "Supposing there are 4 doors leading into the spiritual life, one of gambling, one of drink, one of theft, and one of sex. And supposing you are told that you have to pass through one of them in order to reach spirituality, what would you do?" He looked at me with a radiant smile. My heart made a helpless jump against my ribs, then stopped. I looked at him helplessly. Someone in the group said, "He did ask you questions about the doors, and you have not answered." He repeated again, "Well, what will you do? Tell me, if it is only through these doors that you can reach God." He laughed now, outright, looking straight at me. "Well," I hesitated, "I suppose that if I have to take the door of gambling, I will have to gamble in order to pass through it. If it is the door of drink, I suppose I have to get drunk. If theft, I have to steal something, and if..." And here I stopped. There were many people sitting, looking at me, mostly men, listening to every word. "And if it is the door of sex?" he asked, with a wicked little twinkle in his eye. "Well, I suppose I will have to do it too," I said quickly. I was really perplexed, not knowing what he was driving at. He threw his head back and laughed heartily, greatly amused. I don't know why, I had a sudden feeling of foreboding. His laughter, why? Somehow it made me shiver. Tweedy had only 1 day before she found out what the warning was. She describes the activity of the Muladhara chakra. I felt a vibration, a sound in the lower part of my abdomen. I sat up in surprise. No, I was not mistaken. It was a sound, and I listened to it. It sounded like a soft hiss, and I felt a gentle tickling, as if butterfly wings, or rather a spinning sound like a wheel. A suspicion flashed through my mind that perhaps it was leading to some kind of trouble. But what? It did not take long to discover. I was flooded with a powerful sexual desire. It was just the desire to no object in particular, a kind of wild cosmic force. Then I knew. There it was at the base of the spine, just above the anus. I could feel it distinctly. It must be the Muladhara chakra. I went ice cold with terror. He activated the Muladhara chakra at the base of the spine, and he left the Kundalini there to cook myself in my own juice. End of quote. So Tweedy began the most terrifying experience of her life. The Kundalini snake, the energy of the goddess, called up for so long, it started to travel through the Muladhara chakra, released its energy, and made it spin. Here there were no knots in the chakras, the unconscious complexes, but a freely moving, turning wheel. Tweedy had done a lot of Jungian work, psychological work before this experience. But about all this powerful affect, this sound that Tweedy heard, that hissing, the Kundalini had woken up the subtle body, and the physical body was feeling the referred affect. We will stop here for the moment and come back to Irina Tweedy when we go higher up the chakras. We can perhaps experience and appreciate what that young and fair man was going through as he stood on my doorstep, waiting for me to answer the bell and to find out what could be happening to him and what was the meaning of it. Irina Tweedy received a warning from her teacher that Kundalini was about to happen. For her, it was the event with the guru and the door of sex and his humour about the whole experience. It's not direct, but a hint. The young man, however, received a warning through a dream. And here is the dream. I see myself from the waist down, naked. All my flesh is withered and wasted away. A few remaining bits of flesh hang from my bones. I see myself from the back, and that my anus is prominent, though a little higher up than normal. The anus is surrounded by dark-coloured animal fur. The fur radiates out and is luxuriant. It is a horrible, a shocking sight, and I am frightened. Is this the end of my life? So, as we hear from this dream, the Muladhara chakra is in exactly the same place as described by Irina Tweedy. The flesh is taken from the bones, that is, it is a kind of death to see oneself without flesh. But why is the flesh taken away? Well, it is the symbol of matter, the symbol of incarnation. When the Kundalini begins, after the warning, there is always a warning, even if it is not understood. The flesh, the matter, the illusion, is being separated out by the action of Kundalini. She begins to disentangle the unconscious complex, take away the knots, make the chakras spin. This separation process in the subtle body is referred to the physical body as pain or extreme sexual sensation. The young man sees only bits of flesh hanging from the bones. The shedding of the flesh is the falling away of matter, and the bone that remains is the essence or spirit. The flesh and the bone, these separated elements, will later rejoin and come together on a higher level. When this happens, we can say that the body has resurrected. The symbolic dream shows the activity of the subtle body as it separates from the physical body or the matter. The dream is an intermediary. It's disclosing the event that is taking place in the psyche very objectively. So the resurrection will happen when matter or spirit or illusion and reality come together at a higher level. But for the moment, the young man has to suffer the reality of his condition. And why is the anal opening of the Muladhara chakra surrounded by animal fur? Fur is the luxuriant clothing of the animal. It is one of nature's wonders, which men and women have craved, to wear it for its beauty and warmth. Think of the natural wonder of the leopard and the cheetah's coat, of the tactile lion cub that everyone wants to cuddle because of its soft fur. Children's soft toys that domesticate the savagery of the wild animal, but leave the necessary instinctive cuddling quality, which we also missed in COVID. Then take a step further. The ancient shamans wore animal skins during their rituals, and it is a garment that transforms the wearer, transposing him to another world, another dimension, his or her encounter with the cosmic realm. In the dream, this fur-ringed opening is the door of sex, in its most wild and savage form. There, the snake of Madame Kundalini is turned over, woken up, uncoiled. Jung has the same location for the Muladhara and says of this chakra to his seminar audience, "You assume you know all about it, but psychologically, what is Muladhara? You think of it as that region down below in the abdomen, having to do with sexuality and all sorts of unsavory things. But that is not Muladhara. Muladhara is something quite different. Muladhara is a whole world. Each chakra is a whole world. Perhaps you remember the picture that I showed of a patient," says Jung. Where she was entangled in the roots of a tree, and then above she's stretching towards the light. Now, where was that woman when she was in the roots? Someone in the room says, "In Muladhara." Dr. Jung says, "Yes. And in what condition would that be in reality?" Someone says, "Was it the self sleeping?" Dr. Jung says, "Of course. The self is then asleep. And in which stage is the self asleep and the ego consciousness? Here, of course, in this conscious world, where we are all reasonable and respectable people, adapted individuals, as one says. So we are all in the roots. The root support is the earth upon which we stand, and so it necessarily must be our conscious world." And Jung says, "We are in the earth mandala. Here lies the sleeping beauty, the Kundalini snake, the goddess, asleep." As he's speaking about the Muladhara, Jung makes a very pertinent and very intuitive comment about the next chakra, which is Svadhisthana. For the moment, and close to the end, we look at these two chakras as a pair, illuminating for each other. The Svadhisthana chakra is the water element. It is the second chakra above the Muladhara. Svadhisthana is the unconscious, and so we have its symbol, which is Leviathan, which is the whale, which you can see in the water. So this is the perilous night sea journey when you reach this chakra. You're meeting with enormous forces in the unconscious waters. And here we have one of Jung's paintings. Now, if you look into the bottom half of the picture, just to the right of where the flame comes up, you'll see a tiny little boat, and it's got a golden sun disk on it. That is the boat for the night sea journey. So that's where you go when you reach Svadhisthana. So here is a Kundalini dream of someone experiencing the interaction of the two chakras, Muladhara, the earth, and Svadhisthana, the water. I dream of a garden with many trees. The trees are large and mature. I am digging with some effort around the roots so that they are exposed. Then the roots are being watered, really drenched with water. So you remember the dream of Jung's patient where she's stuck in the roots, reaching up towards the light. But here in the roots of the trees, deep in the earth, that is in the Muladhara chakra, the force of the unconscious waters from the Svadhisthana chakra is coming into the tree roots from above. On a psychological level, this is a reversal also, because in the West we have a tendency to think of the unconscious or the subconscious, that is something lying underneath consciousness. But here in the Oriental version, we see that the unconscious is on top of the conscious. The unconscious is moving up. It's not moving down. It's a little bit like when you see the sign for north, it's always at the top in the West. If you go to China, at the top is the south. So it's a reversal. It's a more Oriental attitude to reverse. So then I would say to you, where do you find the unconscious? For if we think about it, whatever the sign for the north, or the south, or the east, or the west, a compass always registers magnetic north. So for all of us, there is something essential beyond the east and the west. So the east has offered us Kundalini, yet it happens in the west without its name. And next week, we will go a little further up the chakras towards the top. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brenda, for another rich and profound presentation. And thank you to Leo and to others for referencing your work as you were talking. So much food for thought. A few questions. It's really interesting what you said, especially at the end about the difference in terms of the manifestation of Kundalini in East and West. And I found this actually the thing I wanted to ask you when I was reading the book a couple of days ago. And let me just quote from this book. It says that there are many different kinds of yoga, and Europeans often become hypnotized by it, but it is essentially Eastern. No European has the necessary patience. It is not right for him. The more we study yoga, the more we realize how far it is from us. A European can only imitate it, and what he acquires by this is of no real interest. For Jung, the danger was one of the mimetic madness. The European who practices yoga does not know what he is doing. It has a bad effect upon him. Sooner or later, he gets afraid, and sometimes it even leads him over edge of madness. This led him to conclude that in the course of the centuries, the West will produce its own yoga, and it will be on the basis laid by Christianity. I know that there are so many Kundalini yoga workshops and courses here in Europe, but would you actually agree to the assumption to actually the quote I just read to you, that there is that big difference between the East and the West practicing yoga, be that Shakti or Bhakti yoga, Raja yoga,
multiple yogas, yes. I think what you've got to remember is that these were written in 1932. And when you read the seminar, you can see that everyone's a bit, they don't quite know what to do with it. And Jung is repeating himself quite a lot. So what he says about the yoga of Christianity is, of course, to do with alchemy. And the Kundalini yoga is a form of alchemy because, of course, it transforms all the stubborn psychological stuff as it passes through. Of course, I'm speaking of the 2-year experience. I'm not speaking of isolated moments, because most of the people that I saw, it went on for 2 years. So they went through a lot of psychological loosening up as the Kundalini passed through the chakras. So to my mind, when it is an experience, it's neither east nor west. It's like the compass.
Exactly.
And therefore, I mean, these people didn't know. So what was it that came? They'd never been to a workshop. When you take the ideas of the East intellectually and you apply them to a psyche, which of course is deeply embedded in its own roots in the West. Therefore, it's very necessary for us to learn about this. But it's also necessary for us to know ourselves deeply so that we too find our yoga. For instance, yoga is an Eastern word. Kundalini is an Eastern word, but the experience isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to bear in mind when they were written, and some of the people are quite incredulous. And of course, he doesn't say a lot about the experiences. But I just found it useful to help people because of the symbolization, which I had to wait till the end to do that. It couldn't be done during the experience. So during the experience was an accompaniment only. Because it's extremely violent.
It is, that's what I heard. Thank you.
So
sorry.
Carry on.
I have kind of like several questions, but please, in the meantime, if any of you from the audience would like to ask a question from Brenda, please raise your hand. You can find the bottom screen of the Zoom screen, and you just click on it, or you can just put your question or comment in the chat box and I will read it out to her. And while you're doing that, just a couple of questions. So how did Jung interpret the collective unconscious through studying Kundalini? I presume he didn't have a Kundalini rising, did he? Or did he?
My guess is that Jung did experience Kundalini.
Oh, okay.
But of course he would not disclose it.
Oh, he wouldn't. Why not? He disclosed so much in the Red Book.
It's just the era into which he was born. He died in 1963, I think. So he was born in 1875. And so he left certain things alone because he knew it wasn't the time. So my guess that he had quite a lot of these experiences.
Oh, okay. The other thing
the collective unconscious is the same thing as the Kundalini. It's an invasion by the collective unconscious. Now, the collective unconscious isn't personal. It's the part of our psyches which is impersonal. It's only our personal unconscious that carries all our experiences, all the stuff we don't want to look at. But that's not where Kundalini arises. That comes out of the collective unconscious. And there are many words for that. One is objective psychic, which means it's not coming from personal experience. And some people sometimes use the Akashic records, and that's another name for the collective unconscious.
Sure.
It just depends what your vocabulary is.
You said that the Kundalini itself is a feminine energy. Is that correct? Why is it a feminine energy?
It's a visitation by the goddess. And in a way, the fact that the Kundalini is coming to the West has something positive in it, because it emphasizes the feminine. It's definitely feminine. The snake, anyway, is always symbolically feminine.
And
it's the power of the universe. There you have to leave the matriarchal and the patriarchal behind and go into the feminine, which is very different. Yeah. And the feminine godhead is what Kundalini is. She's always a she.
Yeah, and also it is because it rises from the ground, from the earth chakra, really.
Yeah, from the root chakra in the perineum, and it's in the base. It's manifests in matter, even though it's occurring in the subtle body. It manifests in matter.
And also, because, Brenda, you said that it's the Kundalini it's a very subjective experience. So are there different grades according to your experience when you work with clients? Are there different grades of Kundalini rising? Like, would it be that somebody experiences less as a violent event and the other is more like totally going mental?
Well, it depends. If the chakras are very entangled, then the experience is going to be violent. Or if there is too much of the use of ego consciousness or too much of an intellectual approach, then the Kundalini will sort of attack that.
Okay.
And try and dissolve that hardness in the nature of a person, be it man or woman. So some people don't experience anything at all because their chakras are loose. It just goes up. So it's invisible.
Okay.
And it just manifests, it shows in the dreams. And you just think, oh yes, I think that's the Svadhisthara, as it shows in the dreams. Oh yes, because you recognize the symbols.
Thank you. The other thing you mentioned, and then we turn to Susu, who put her hand up, you said that Kundalini awakens the subtle body, but there are other approaches and ways to do so, be it shamanic drumming or vibrational healing techniques and etc. So what is the meaningful difference between different ways of awakening the chakras?
And I mean, the chakras are in the subtle body. They're not in the physical body. Yeah. It's just that we have senses through which to experience. So it's referred. It's a bit like some diseases have a referred pain. You know, you get a pain in your big toe and it's something wrong with your liver. That sort of thing. So when the subtle body it awakes, and we just hope that science will find more about it, probably the quantum level of physics is to do with the subtle body. So it means that energy healing, for instance, is healing the subtle body and not the physical body. Yeah. So once you heal through a healing system, it can be acupuncture or various other healing systems. They all go into the meridians of the subtle body. Yeah. There's no way a meridian is registered physically in acupuncture. It's always in the subtle body.
And many energy healers actually say that one should really start with healing the subtle body and then the physical, but because the physical
because that ripples into the physical body. Exactly. So bring it on is all I say. Let's heal our subtle bodies. The other word for the subtle body is the etheric body, which is sometimes used instead. So, you know, there are vocabularies depending on what system you're in. For instance, Rudolf Steiner would use etheric body. I would use subtle body because I'm used to Jung.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone else would use energy body because they have that discipline.
Yeah.
So it's important to see the equivalences.
Yeah, thank you. Now let's turn to Susu. Georg, would you please open Susu's audio so she could comment on Brenda's presentation?
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Hi everyone. Nice to see you again. I find this presentation very good, and I will stick to one point you were saying about this bone and flesh equivalence. And I was in that moment, I was thinking that, for example, if someone gets a transplantation after something, they get a transplantation. It's kind of an incarnation also. Yes, because if they are splitting and then coming together again, this is like incarnation.
It's not a split in the personality. It's not that. It's a separation to disentangle, so that you can become free. So the two things separate because it's a disentangling process, and then they join together. But they join together on a higher level. But they're still matter and spirit, and then they go through another transformation and separate again. So it's continuous through your life. You will always, if you're engaged fully in your psychic work, you will separate continuously and come together on the higher level of consciousness.
Yeah, very good. Yes.
Yeah. So when you get to here, the crown chakra, of course, this is in the beyond. But we have to do our psychological work just up to here. We say we're up to our neck in it. That's our psychological work. And after that, something comes to us.
Oh.
So once we pass the Visuddha, we're into another world where there are no psychological complexes. And something, instead of us searching and working, doing our psychological work, something comes to us. We're approached. So that is, you could say, the gift of the work that we do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes. This is a little bit like the swirling and coming together again in this new forms. Yes, it makes sense.
So it's continuous creation, destruction, creation, destruction, creation.
Thank you, Susu. Thank you. I just want to read a message from Jane. She says, brilliant, how you have woven so beautifully this tapestry for us. I especially appreciate the bridge of East and West, inner and outer, and placing us in the context of our own history evolution. The invitation to transform, to entangle our stubborn self-conscious little selves. What an important book topic for our time. Thank you, thank you. I look forward to the next part. Yeah.
Someone asked for the page that I used, Linda White, and it's page 105 in Daughter of Far. Just to, as I see, I've quickly got that reference.
Yeah, there is a new.
It's quite important for us to learn from the East because of the depth of their incredible knowledge about the human psyche. It's absolutely wonderful. But at the same time, we have to be who we are. But my wish is that there won't be an East and a West eventually. that we will share everything. But that is perhaps a long way away.
Yeah, probably. Well, still, I guess that as long as the Earth spins around, there will be an east and west geographically, but maybe not in terms of like wisdom and knowledge. So that would be, yeah, that's a long way away. Maybe in next lives.
Yeah, maybe millennia. Who knows? But we all use a compass in the same way for magnetic north, so we are united in this orientation.
Have you, Brenda? Have you had Kundalini? Have you experienced Kundalini rising?
Let's not go there.
Okay. All right. Okay, Jill Horn is asking, so if artist is drawing in Kundalini, can you tell which chakra is the focus of each stage?
Depending on your experience, the Kundalini could go up through earth, into water, and back down to earth. Come up through water, up through fire, and come down. So those lines, in the next session, I'm going to explain more those lines, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with information. But where these lines go like that we saw going around the chakras, they also go the other way. So they're constantly in movement, like a snake going up, snake coming down. It's not that you know, like a fruit machine where you go up, it's ping, and then there's another, and then another, and finally you get to the top. It doesn't work like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's leave some more questions for next time.
Yes.
So we shall see you all in a month's time, same place, only in October. Thank you so much, Brenda, for another wonderful presentation, and look forward.
Thank you. And you'll have more experiences next time.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for Georg for facilitating this Zoom session, and for all our attendees, stay well and safe, and see you in a month's time. All the very best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.